The sickening thud reverberated through the very core of my truck, a sound that instantly transformed the peaceful hum of the engine into a deafening silence within my mind. It wasn't the metallic screech of a fender bender, nor the dull slap of a deer, but something softer, yet infinitely more substantial. A shudder ran through the entire rig, a massive 18-wheeler capable of plowing through concrete barriers with barely a dent. For a split second, the world outside dissolved into a kaleidoscope of spinning lights and shadow, then snapped back into the inky blackness of the remote highway. My hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white, as an icy tendril of dread snaked its way up my spine, whispering of an unknown, terrifying presence just beyond the reach of my headlights. The sheer force of the impact had been immense, undeniable, and it had left an unnerving silence in its wake, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs. My name is Michael, and for the better part of 20 years, the open road has been my sanctuary, my office, my very existence. A truck driver through and through, I've navigated endless miles of asphalt from the scorching deserts of Arizona to the frigid plains of Montana. My life is a rhythm of diesel engines, truck stop coffee, and the constant solitary companionship of the highway. I'm a man of routine, of logic, of what I can see, touch, and measure. Ghosts, ghouls, and all the fantastical creatures spun from campfire tales? They were the stuff of fiction, entertaining distractions for long hauls, but nothing I'd ever given a second thought to in the real world. I'm pragmatic, a no-nonsense individual who trusts in mechanics and physics, not folklore. A hard-worn skepticism is a necessary shield when you spend so much time alone with your thoughts, traversing the forgotten corners of this vast country. This night, however, was about to challenge every single one of my deeply held convictions. It was late, impossibly late. The kind of hour when the world feels like it's holding its breath, and the only sounds are the whispers of the wind. I was somewhere deep in the Pacific Northwest, the kind of place where towering old-growth forests press in on either side of the road, creating tunnels of almost supernatural darkness. The highway was desolate, unlit by anything but the anemic glow of my own headlights and the distant stars trying to pierce through the dense canopy. The last town was hours behind me, the next hours ahead, just the way I liked it. Solitude. That's what I craved. But tonight, that solitude felt less like peace and more like an ominous isolation. I'd been on the road for 14 hours, the steady drone of the engine lulling me into that familiar, hypnotic trance. My coffee was long cold, and my mind was drifting toward the promise of a hot shower and a few hours' sleep. That's when it happened. One moment. The road stretched out ahead, empty and familiar. The next, a colossal dark shape erupted from the impenetrable shadow of the forest to my left, hurtling across my path with terrifying speed. There was no time to react, no possibility of swerving the massive rig. My foot slammed on the brake pedal out of pure instinct, but it was already too late. The sickening thud that followed was instantaneous, bone-jarring, and utterly horrifying. The entire truck lurched violently, and I wrestled the steering wheel, fighting to maintain control as the massive vehicle skidded. A primal, guttural cry, unlike anything I had ever heard, tore through the night. A sound of agony and raw, animalistic pain that sent shivers down to my very bones. The reverberations of the impact died down, leaving an echoing void. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, overwhelming silence. What had I hit? Deer, bear, even a moose. I'd seen them all. But this felt different. The size, the sheer mass of whatever it was, had been immense. The sound it made was not the familiar shriek of an animal in distress. It was a sound loaded with an almost human quality of suffering, a profound, mournful bellow that seemed to curdle the air itself. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, despite the chilly night air. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to keep driving, to pretend this never happened, to rationalize it as an unfortunate collision with a large animal, and put as much distance between myself and this spot as humanly possible. But the weight of that sound, that agonizing cry, anchored me in place. No, not anchored. It held me hostage. My hands trembled as I carefully brought the truck to a halt, easing it onto the narrow shoulder of the road. The engine idled, a low rumble now the only sound breaking the oppressive stillness. The dark woods loomed, silent and watchful. I peered into the rearview mirror, but the darkness was absolute, swallowing everything behind me. Whatever I had hit was back there, swallowed by the night. A primal fear, one I hadn't felt since I was a child, began to well up inside me. It wasn't just fear of hitting something. It was fear of what I had hit. A feeling of profound unease settled over me, a chilling premonition that my life, in this desolate stretch of highway, was about to diverge onto a path I could never have imagined. Before you hear what happened next, and trust me, you won't believe it, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss a single part of this incredible, chilling encounter. We bring you true stories, encounters with the unexplained, and tales that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the world. So, click subscribe, turn on notifications, and prepare yourself for the impossible. The sickening thud still vibrated through the chassis of Michael's truck, a chilling echo in the dead silence that had immediately fallen. His hands, though calloused from decades on the wheel, gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. His breath hitched in his throat, a primal fear coiling in his gut as he stared into the impenetrable darkness ahead. What on earth had he hit? The question hammered in his mind, sharp and insistent, battling against a deeper, more ancient terror that whispered of things unseen and unknown. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to put the truck into reverse, to flee, to pretend this horrifying incident had never happened. But Michael wasn't one to run. Not entirely. His pragmatic nature, honed by years of navigating treacherous roads and even more treacherous human interactions, demanded an assessment. He pulled the rig over to the shoulder, the massive vehicle shuddering to a halt with a groan of metal. The engine idled, a low, thrumming pulse in the otherwise absolute stillness of the Pacific Northwest forest. Outside, the world was a black canvas, punctuated only by the weak beam of his headlights, which seemed to swallow more shadows than they illuminated. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, each beat a painful reminder of the impact. He thought of deer, elk, maybe even a bear. Unfortunate, certainly, but explainable. Yet the sound, the feel of the collision, had been unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It had possessed a density, a heavy, unyielding quality that defied easy classification. He considered the damage to his truck, a beast of a machine that had carried him through countless miles and minor mishaps. He could ill afford a major repair, especially not out here in the middle of nowhere. A cold dread seeped into him, chilling him to the bone despite the warmth of the cab. He needed to know. He had to know. With a reluctant sigh that sounded more like a choked gasp, he cut the engine. The silence that followed was oppressive, a heavy blanket that smothered all sound, even the distant chirping of crickets. The forest loomed, a wall of ancient trees, their branches appearing like skeletal fingers reaching out from the gloom. He fumbled for his industrial-strength flashlight, its beam a reassuring weight in his trembling hand. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, he pushed open the heavy door, the creak echoing unnaturally loud in the profound stillness. The cool, damp night air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine needles, wet earth, and something else. Something metallic and vaguely organic, a faint, almost imperceptible tang of blood. He shone the powerful beam of the flashlight toward the front of his truck. The grille was crumpled, a jagged wound in the otherwise sturdy metal. A broken headlight dangled precariously, but it was the ground that instantly drew his attention. There, in the soft shoulder dirt, were impressions unlike any he'd ever seen. They were enormous, easily twice the size of his own size 12 boot, with distinct toe marks. Not paw prints, not claw marks. These were footprints, humanoid, yet impossibly large. His skepticism, a lifelong companion, began to crack, a hairline fracture appearing in his carefully constructed worldview. He followed the monstrous tracks, his flashlight beam dancing ahead, revealing a disturbing trail. The prints led off the road, veering into the dense undergrowth alongside the highway. His curiosity, now tinged with a terrifying certainty, propelled him forward, one hesitant step after another. The air grew heavier, the scent of blood more pronounced, metallic and rich. He pushed aside thick ferns and tangled vines, the harsh crunch of dry leaves underfoot sounding like thunder in his ears. Then he saw it. Partially obscured by a fallen log and a thick curtain of moss, lay a colossal form. His flashlight beam played over thick, dark fur, coarse and matted. It was massive, easily 8 or 9 feet long, lying sprawled and motionless. As he drew closer, the beam illuminated a dark, viscous pool spreading rapidly beneath the creature. The source was a grotesque gash along its side, a deep, ragged wound from which blood pulsed sluggishly, staining the forest floor a horrifying crimson. It was a creature of myth, brought to sickening, bleeding reality, a Bigfoot. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking, terrifying. Its massive chest rose and fell with slow, agonizing effort. One huge, powerful arm was bent at an unnatural angle, and its head, covered in the same shaggy dark fur, was turned away, partially buried in the leaves, obscuring its face from his view. The powerful, musky scent of wild animal, mixed with the coppery tang of fresh blood, filled his nostrils, making him gag. His mind reeled, trying to reconcile the impossible image before him with everything he'd ever known, ever believed. Bigfoot was a story, a campfire tale, a blurry photo in a doctored magazine. It wasn't supposed to be real. It wasn't supposed to be lying here, injured and bleeding, because Iggy had hit it with his truck. Fear, raw and primitive, seized him, urging him to turn and run, to pretend this monstrous vision was just a nightmare from which he would soon wake. But beneath the terror, a strange, unexpected emotion began to stir, a profound pity. This colossal, legendary being was hurt, gravely so, and it was his fault. His skepticism, which had been his shield against the bizarre and the unbelievable for so long, finally shattered completely. The undeniable reality of the bleeding creature before him left no room for doubt. The mythical was now tangible, vulnerable, and in dire need of help. A heavy sense of responsibility settled over him, displacing some of the initial shock. He had caused this injury. He, Michael, the pragmatic truck driver, was now inextricably linked to a secret that could change the world, a secret currently whimpering faintly in the dark undergrowth. The primal fear that had gripped Michael slowly began to recede, replaced by a more immediate, sobering clarity. The creature before him, though impossibly large and undeniably mythical, was suffering. Its chest heaved with each ragged breath, a low, guttural moan rumbling from deep within its throat. The rich, metallic scent of blood was overpowering now, a stark reminder of the damage he had inadvertently inflicted. Michael, a man whose life on the road had instilled a deep sense of self-reliance and practical problem-solving, found himself assessing the situation with an almost clinical detachment, a reflex from his days in the military. He noticed the deep laceration along the creature's flank, where the impact had clearly occurred. It was wide, probably deep, and bleeding with an alarming steady flow that pooled on the damp forest floor. His gaze traveled over the creature's immense form, noting the powerful, muscular limbs, the dense, dark fur matted with soil and now, blood. There was a raw, vulnerable quality to its distress, a stark contrast to the terrifying image of a hulking beast that folklore had painted. He saw the flicker of pain in its deep-set eyes, a silent plea that transcended species. A strange, almost paternal instinct began to stir within him. This wasn't some monster. It was an injured being, a living, breathing entity in desperate need. His skepticism, once an unyielding fortress, had crumbled in the face of such undeniable, visceral reality. He remembered a basic first aid course from his early days in the Army. The rudimentary principles of stopping bleeding, immobilizing injuries, providing comfort. He didn't have much, but he had to try. The silence of the forest seemed to press in, amplifying the creature's ragged breathing and his own thrumming pulse. Turning quickly, Michael rushed back to his rig. He rummaged through the cab, pulling out a stack of old towels he kept for spills or unexpected repairs, along with a first aid kit that contained antiseptic wipes and some rolls of gauze. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear now, but from the sheer audacity of what he was about to attempt. He looked back at the creature, partially obscured by the shadows. Its dark form, a large, silent testament to a world beyond human understanding. With the supplies clutched in his hands, Michael approached cautiously, his movements slow and deliberate. "Hey there," he murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "Easy now. I'm gonna try and help." The creature flinched slightly at his voice, its head lifting with an effort, but its eyes remained fixed on him, wide and intelligent. There was no aggression, only a profound weariness. He knelt beside it, the proximity overwhelming him with the sheer scale of the being. Its fur was coarse, surprisingly clean despite the blood, and radiated a faint, earthy scent. He carefully, tentatively, began to press the thick towels against the wound. The creature let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated through Michael's chest, but it was a growl of pain, not anger. He pressed firmer, applying steady pressure. The blood, though still flowing, seemed to slow just a fraction. As he worked, Michael found himself studying the creature's face. It was undeniably ape-like, with a prominent brow ridge and a broad, powerful jaw, yet there was an undeniable sentience in its eyes. They were dark, reflective pools that seemed to hold an ancient sadness, observing his every move with an unnerving intensity. He expected aggression, a defensive lashing out, but encountered only a surprising docility, an almost fragile vulnerability in its immense form. Its whimpers were soft, almost childlike, a stark contradiction to its formidable appearance. He cleaned around the wound as best he could with the antiseptic wipes, the creature flinching but allowing him to continue. Then, he began to wrap the gauze carefully, trying to secure it without causing further distress. He could feel the warmth of its body through the fur, the shuddering of its muscles with each labored breath. A strange, almost inexplicable bond began to form in those tense moments. A silent acknowledgement of shared space and a desperate need for aid. This wasn't just an animal. It was something more, something profoundly intelligent and deeply feeling. The Bigfoot watched him, its large hand, surprisingly dexterous, resting gently on the ground mere inches from Michael's arm. It didn't try to pull away, didn't try to swat him. Instead, its gaze seemed to implore, to trust. Michael, the solitary truck driver, who had scoffed at tales of cryptids, was now tending to a bleeding Sasquatch, and in doing so, felt an unexpected surge of compassion. He found himself talking to it, softly, reassuringly, explaining his actions as if it could fully understand. "Just trying to stop the bleeding, big fella. You're gonna be okay. We'll get you patched up." The creature responded with another mournful groan, its breath warm on Michael's face. It was a language of pain and mutual understanding, unspoken but powerfully felt. The fear had completely dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of responsibility. He had hit this creature. He had hurt it. And now, against all logic and reason, he was compelled to help it. The vast, silent forest seemed to hold its breath, witnessing this impossible connection between man and myth. Michael knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that his life had irrevocably changed. The profound sense of responsibility Michael felt for the injured Sasquatch pushed him into a moral quagmire he never imagined. Here he was, face to face with a creature of legend, bleeding and vulnerable, and the immediate, terrifying implication was clear. It needed more help than he could possibly provide on the side of a remote logging road. Yet, the thought of exposing it, of bringing it to a hospital, or calling for official help, sent a chill down his spine, far colder than the forest night. Michael had seen enough of humanity to know that such a discovery would lead to chaos, exploitation, and almost certainly the creature's capture, dissection, or worse. The intellectual curiosity of scientists, the sensationalism of the media, the fear of the unknown from the general public. None of it boded well for this gentle giant. He grappled with the ethical implications of his discovery, the weight of a monumental secret pressing down on him. How could he protect this being that had, through its very existence and its passive suffering, entrusted itself to him? His mind raced, discarding scenario after scenario, each one ending in a tragic fate for the creature. There was only one path forward that offered any hope of preserving its freedom and its life. He had to move it, hide it, and somehow figure out how to provide the care it needed without revealing its existence. The idea was audacious, perhaps even insane, but the alternative was unthinkable. He glanced at his truck, specifically at the heavy-duty winch mounted on the front. It was designed for pulling out stuck vehicles, not for transporting mythical beasts, but it was his only option. With a grim determination, Michael meticulously planned his next steps. First, he needed to get the creature off the road and deeper into the protective embrace of the dense forest, where it would be less visible and more secure. He spoke softly to the Sasquatch, explaining his intentions, though he knew the words were likely just sounds. "All right, big guy," he murmured, patting its matted fur. "We gotta get you somewhere safe. Off the road, into the trees." The creature stirred, its eyes still tracking him, a silent understanding passing between them. Michael carefully maneuvered his truck, backing it up as close as he dared to the creature. ensuring no unnecessary strain on its injured leg. He unspooled the winch cable, a thick, strong steel rope, and deliberated on the best way to secure it. He ultimately decided on a broad sling he fashioned from several heavy-duty tarps and straps he kept for securing cargo. Working slowly, mindful of the creature's pain, he managed to slide the makeshift sling underneath its massive form. It was a laborious process, requiring delicate movements and constant reassurance. The Sasquatch winced, a low groan escaping its throat, but it remained remarkably cooperative, sensing, perhaps, Michael's intent to help rather than harm. Engaging the winch, Michael began the slow, arduous process of dragging the injured Sasquatch deeper into the woods. The groan of the winch motor was a harsh sound in the otherwise quiet night, but he kept the speed low, ensuring the movement was as gentle as possible. The sheer weight of the creature was immense, and the ground was uneven, but inch by painstaking inch, he pulled it further from the road, the vehicle's tires struggling for traction in the soft earth. He stopped frequently, checking on the Sasquatch, adjusting the sling, and offering quiet words of encouragement. The creature watched him with unblinking intensity, its trust palpable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he had moved it a considerable distance, enough to be well hidden from any passing vehicles or curious eyes. Now, it lay amongst a cluster of ancient fir trees, partially obscured by the undergrowth, yet still exposed to the chill night air. The next priority was shelter. Michael rummaged through his truck, pulling out more tarps, bungee cords, and a small folding shovel. He began to construct a makeshift lean-to, securing tarps between the fir trees, creating a rudimentary but effective windbreak and overhead cover. He layered the ground with dry leaves and a spare sleeping bag from his truck, trying to create a soft, insulated bed for the massive animal. The air was growing colder, and the last thing the injured creature needed was exposure. He worked with a quiet urgency, his hands moving automatically, driven by a primal need to protect. As he finished the basic structure, he saw the Sasquatch shift, its eyes slowly scanning its new, temporary home. A faint sigh escaped it, a sound of profound relief. Michael, exhausted but strangely exhilarated, sat down heavily beside it, his back against a tree trunk. The adrenaline that had propelled him through the last few hours began to wane, leaving him with a deep weariness. He knew his vigil was far from over. He couldn't leave it alone. The injury was severe, and the risk of infection or further complications was high. He needed to monitor its condition, provide comfort, and figure out the next, even more complex steps. Michael pulled out his thermos, pouring some water into a clean plastic container, and gently offered it to the Sasquatch. It sniffed hesitantly, then slowly, deliberately, began to drink, its large tongue lapping at the water. It was a small act, but one that cemented the unspoken bond between them. Throughout the long, dark hours of the night, Michael stayed by its side, a silent guardian. He dozed fitfully, waking at every rustle, every groan from the injured beast. He checked the bandage, feeling for warmth, listening to its labored breathing. The skepticism that had defined his view of the world for so long had completely evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming, protective instinct. This wasn't some fantasy or an elaborate hoax. This was real. A living, breathing, suffering being that now depended on him. The forest continued its nocturnal symphony, oblivious to the impossible tableau unfolding within its depths. Michael had been a lone wolf for most of his life, a pragmatist who trusted only what he could see and touch. Now he was bound to a myth, a secret keeper on the precipice of an unimaginable journey. protecting a creature that would fundamentally reshape his understanding of existence. The dawn would bring new challenges, but for now, in the quiet darkness, he simply watched over his extraordinary patient, a silent promise hanging heavy in the cool night air. The sun, a pale disk in the misty morning sky, found Michael hunched over his makeshift camp, the colossal form of the injured Sasquatch resting nearby, its breathing still shallow but more regular than before. He had spent the night in a restless vigil, the immense responsibility of his unexpected patient weighing heavily on him. The sheer absurdity of the situation struck him again, a jolt of disbelief. But the evidence of the creature's slow, agonizing recovery was undeniable. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the bandages and antiseptic wipes he had scrounged from his first aid kit were woefully insufficient. This was a creature of immense size and unique physiology, and its wound, while stabilized, required more than rudimentary care. He pulled out his satellite phone, its old-school bulk a stark contrast to the magical reality unfolding around him. He scrolled through his contacts, his thumb hovering over a name he hadn't called in years. Dr. Elias Thorne, a retired veterinarian and an old army buddy, known for his unconventional methods and unwavering discretion. Michael knew Thorne wouldn't balk at a strange request, though he would certainly be curious. Taking a deep breath, Michael dialed. "Thorne here," a gravelly voice answered, laced with the expected early morning gruffness. Michael chose his words carefully, weaving a plausible, if highly improbable tale. "Elias, it's Michael. I've got a large animal situation out here. Hit a deer, I think, but it's much bigger than anything I've seen. Massive antlers, maybe some kind of elk, but truly enormous. It's got a deep gash. Bleeding's mostly stopped, but it's in a bad way. I can't leave it." He paused, listening to the static crackle on the line. "Need some advice, man. What kind of meds would you give a creature this size for pain and infection? And what supplies should I look for?" Thorne, ever the pragmatic professional, didn't question the improbable size. His mind, Michael knew, was already calculating dosages for a theoretical mega elk. "Michael, you fool. What are you doing out in the sticks with a wounded animal? You know the risks. For something that big, you'll need broad-spectrum antibiotics, industrial-strength pain relief. Think large livestock dosages. Look for something like flunixin meglumine for the pain, and perhaps a long-acting oxytetracycline for infection. Get the largest rolls of sterile gauze you can find, and some veterinary-grade wound wash. Any signs of shock? Is it eating?" Michael mentally translated mega elk to Sasquatch. "No signs of shock now, but it's not eaten. Just water. It's surprisingly calm." He omitted the intelligent eyes and the shared understanding. "Right," Thorne mused. "Keep it hydrated. If it's calm, that's a good sign. Don't try to move it too much for now. I'd come out there myself, but you know my back. Best of luck, Michael. Call me if anything changes." Michael ended the call, a surge of relief mixed with profound unease washing over him. Thorne, bless his trusting nature, had bought the story. Now came the hard part, getting the supplies without raising suspicion. He calculated the nearest town, a small logging community hours away, and the risks involved. He couldn't leave the Bigfoot alone for too long, not in its vulnerable state. He promised the creature, speaking softly, that he'd be back as quickly as possible. The Sasquatch watched him with those deep, knowing eyes, a flicker of something akin to understanding passing between them. The drive was agonizing. Every passing vehicle felt like a potential threat. Every gas station attendant, a scrutinizing gaze. He bought the veterinary supplies, along with a week's worth of human rations, meticulously splitting his purchases across 3 different stores to avoid suspicion. He felt like a spy on a covert mission, the fate of a legendary creature resting on his ability to blend in. The sheer weight of the responsibility was immense. He was safeguarding not just an individual life, but potentially an entire species. A secret that could shatter the known world. Returning to the secluded spot felt like coming home. The Bigfoot was exactly where he'd left it. Its breathing still shallow, but its eyes brighter. A spark of life returning. Michael approached cautiously, holding up the supplies. "Got the goods, big guy," he murmured, his voice thick with exhaustion and a strange tenderness. He began the delicate process of administering care. The broad-spectrum antibiotics came in large, injectable doses. Michael, with trembling hands, prepared the syringe. The thought of piercing that leathery skin filled him with trepidation. He looked into the creature's eyes, silently asking for permission. The Sasquatch watched him, its gaze unwavering, and then, slowly, deliberately, it extended its arm, presenting a less muscled patch of skin just above its elbow. It was an act of profound trust, a silent communication that transcended words. Michael, heart pounding, quickly injected the medication. The Bigfoot flinched, a low growl rumbling in its chest, but did not pull away. Next, the pain medication, an oral paste designed for horses. He squeezed a generous amount onto his hand, offering it to the creature. It sniffed cautiously, then licked the paste clean, its powerful tongue surprisingly gentle. Finally, he carefully removed the blood-soaked bandages, cleaning the wound with the veterinary wash. The gash was deep, still angry, but already showing signs of the body's natural healing process. He applied fresh, sterile gauze, wrapping it securely. This time, as he worked, the creature laid its head down, its breathing evening out, a deep sigh escaping its massive chest. Over the next few days, a quiet routine settled into their makeshift camp. Michael administered the antibiotics and pain relief twice daily, meticulously changing the bandages. Each morning, he'd gather wild berries and fresh water, leaving them within the Bigfoot's reach. He even managed to catch a few small fish from a nearby stream, which the creature devoured with surprising relish, its powerful jaws easily crushing bones. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the creature began to mend. The deep gash started to close, the skin around it knitting together. Its eyes lost their haunted weariness, replaced by a keen intelligence, sometimes even a spark of curiosity. It began to move more freely, testing its wounded leg, its raw strength evident even in these tentative movements. Michael would catch glimpses of it, standing upright for short periods, its immense frame a silhouette against the dense forest canopy. The progress was undeniable, a testament to its formidable natural resilience and Michael's unwavering dedication. An unspoken bond solidified between them, forged in fear, cemented in shared vulnerability, and the quiet miracle of healing. Michael, the pragmatic truck driver, now found himself a reluctant, devoted caregiver to a creature thought to exist only in legend. His skepticism was not just challenged. It had been utterly annihilated, replaced by awe and a profound sense of wonder. He was witnessing, firsthand, a secret that defied human understanding, and he was a part of it. The days that followed deepened the improbable connection forged between Michael and the Sasquatch. With each clean dressing change and every carefully administered dose of pain medication, a new layer of understanding unfolded. The creature, whom Michael had silently begun to call Goliath in his mind, communicated not with words, but with a nuanced symphony of gestures, gazes, and soft rumbling sounds. Its eyes, once filled with profound sadness, now held a glimmer of something akin to curiosity, even affection. When Michael approached, Goliath would slowly shift, extending a massive fur-covered limb with a surprising delicacy, allowing easy access to the healing wound. Michael would speak to it in a low, soothing tone, explaining every action, and Goliath would listen, its head tilted slightly, intelligent eyes tracking his movements. One afternoon, as Michael was carefully rebandaging Goliath's leg, a small, intricate bird flew close to their makeshift shelter, chirping brightly. Goliath's head snapped up, its gaze following the bird with an almost childlike wonder. Then, with an unexpected swiftness, it reached out a hand, not to grab, but to gently extend a massive index finger, almost as if inviting the tiny creature to perch. The bird, unafraid, actually landed briefly on Goliath's finger before flitting away. Michael watched in awe, realizing the profound gentleness inherent in this colossal being, an aspect so contrary to the monstrous depictions he had always heard. This wasn't a beast. This was a sentient being of immense power, yes, but also of remarkable grace, and an innate connection to the natural world around it. Through these unspoken interactions, Michael started to decipher Goliath's subtle cues. A soft huff meant contentment, a low rumble indicated discomfort, and a slow blink often preceded a trusting lean into Michael's touch. There were moments when Goliath would simply sit, observing Michael as he prepared food or tended to his truck, a quiet, almost contemplative presence. Michael discovered that Goliath had a particular fondness for berries he foraged from the forest edge, consuming them with a delicate precision that belied its size. He also noticed how Goliath would often look towards the deeper woods, particularly during twilight hours, a wistful expression in its eyes, a silent yearning for the wild freedom of its true home. This primal instinct, even subdued by injury and the strange circumstances, was beginning to reassert itself. Michael found himself wrestling with a growing emotional attachment to the creature. He had started this endeavor out of a moral obligation, and then a strange sense of scientific curiosity. But now it was something far more personal. He admired Goliath's stoicism, its quiet dignity, and the profound intelligence that radiated from its eyes. The thought of letting it go, of returning to his solitary life on the road without this extraordinary companion, filled him with an unexpected pang of loneliness. He had spent his life avoiding deep connections, preferring the transient nature of a truck driver's existence. Yet here he was, forming an unbreakable bond with a creature deemed mythical. The signs of recovery were becoming undeniable. Goliath's limp was less pronounced, its movements more fluid, and the strength in its gaze was returning with an almost palpable force. It would occasionally stand fully upright, stretching its powerful limbs, and the sheer scale of it, even in recovery, was breathtaking. Michael knew, deep down, that his time as Goliath's caretaker was drawing to a close. Every lingering glance Goliath cast towards the dense, inviting forest was a silent testament to its growing need for the wild. The urge to retain this incredible secret, to perhaps even try and keep Goliath hidden, warred with his understanding of what was truly best for the creature. He knew Goliath belonged to the forest, to its own kind, and keeping it would be a selfish, unnatural act. The decision was painful, a heavy weight settling in his chest, but it was also clear. Goliath was not a pet, nor a scientific specimen to be caged or studied. It was a magnificent, free creature of the wild. He had healed it, provided sanctuary, and now he had to grant it the ultimate freedom it craved. The thought of the impending departure brought a lump to Michael's throat. He would miss the quiet companionship, the shared moments of understanding, the profound sense of purpose Goliath had brought to his otherwise routine life. He would miss the way Goliath's eyes seemed to peer into his very soul, seeing beyond the gruff exterior to the man underneath. One evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky in fiery hues, Michael sat beside Goliath, both gazing into the darkening woods. Goliath let out a soft, almost imperceptible huff, and then, for the first time, it reached out a large, three-fingered hand and gently, almost timidly, rested it on Michael's shoulder. The touch was light, yet incredibly powerful, conveying a depth of gratitude that transcended any language. In that moment, Michael knew. The time had come. He took a deep breath, the crisp forest air filling his lungs, and made the final, difficult decision. He would lead Goliath back into the heart of the forest in the morning, back to where it truly belonged. The unspoken goodbye had already begun. The morning air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, as Michael prepared for what he knew would be one of the most difficult goodbyes of his life. He had packed a small satchel with some provisions for himself, but mostly he focused on making the path for Goliath as clear and comfortable as possible. There was no need for words, no elaborate gestures. Their connection had long since evolved beyond the superficial. Goliath seemed to sense the finality of the moment, its movements deliberate, its gaze more reflective than usual. Michael led the way, guiding the massive creature deeper into the forest, past the makeshift camp that had been their sanctuary, and further into the dense, ancient woods that were Goliath's true home. They moved slowly, Michael carefully navigating through the underbrush, occasionally glancing back to ensure Goliath was following comfortably. The early morning light filtered through the canopy in dappled patterns, creating an almost ethereal glow that seemed to bless their somber procession. Michael felt a strange mix of emotions, profound sadness at the impending separation, but also a quiet pride in the creature's restored health and newfound vigor. He had done his part, fulfilled an unexpected moral imperative, and now it was time to honor the ancient call of the wild. He chose a specific path, one that led towards a ridge he'd spotted on his initial reconnaissance, an area that looked untouched by human encroachment, a true wilderness sanctuary. This, he hoped, would be deep enough, far enough, to ensure Goliath's continued safety and anonymity. As they ascended the gentle slope of the ridge, the sounds of the distant highway, a constant low hum in the background of their temporary refuge, began to fade entirely. Here, only the rustling of leaves, the chirping of unseen birds, and the soft padding of Goliath's massive feet broke the silence. Michael found a perfect spot, a small clearing encircled by towering old-growth trees, their branches interlaced like the arches of a cathedral. He stopped, turning to face Goliath, who stood patiently behind him, its intelligent eyes fixed on Michael's. The air crackled with unspoken meaning, a heavy, poignant silence settling between them. Michael reached out, not quite touching, but offering an open hand and a gesture of peace and profound respect. He swallowed hard, trying to dislodge the lump in his throat. He wanted to say something, anything, to articulate the whirlwind of emotions swirling within him, but no words seemed adequate. How do you say goodbye to a creature that has profoundly altered your understanding of the world, that has forged an unimaginable bond with you? He simply held the gaze, allowing the depth of their shared experience to communicate itself. Goliath understood. There was no doubt in Michael's mind. The massive creature stepped forward, its great hand once again reaching out, this time resting gently on Michael's chest, directly over his heart. The touch was surprisingly tender, conveying a powerful mix of gratitude, understanding, and perhaps a touch of its own sorrow. It was a silent acknowledgement, a final, profound farewell that transcended species and language. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, Goliath turned. It paused for a long moment, looking back at Michael over its shoulder, its gaze intense and knowing, holding Michael's eyes in a long, lingering silence that spoke volumes. It was a silent promise, a shared memory that would forever bind them. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, the immense figure melted into the dense foliage, disappearing seamlessly into the dappled light and shadow of the forest, becoming one with the ancient trees and the wild landscape. The forest was suddenly, profoundly empty. The air felt thinner, the silence heavier. Michael stood there for what felt like an eternity, his hand still instinctively raised, his eyes scanning the spot where Goliath had vanished. A profound sense of loss washed over him, a cold, desolate ache in his chest. The companionship, however brief and unconventional, had filled a void he hadn't even realized existed within him. He had been so focused on the practicalities of healing Goliath, then the emotional struggle of letting go, that he hadn't fully prepared for the stark emptiness that would follow. It was the quietest, most poignant farewell imaginable, and it left an indelible mark on his soul. Yet, amidst the sorrow, a quiet satisfaction began to unfurl within him. He had done the right thing. He had honored Goliath's wild nature, protected its secret, and facilitated its return to its rightful place. There was a sense of completion, a peaceful resignation that settled over the lingering sadness. The forest around him, which had once felt merely like a backdrop to his life on the road, now seemed imbued with a new sense of magic, a deeper mystery. It was no longer just trees and earth. It was a sanctuary, a secret world teeming with wonders beyond human comprehension. He had glimpsed a part of that world, touched its ancient heart, and it had forever changed his perception of reality. He eventually found his way back to the secluded area where he had left his truck, the journey back feeling longer, the forest more vast and silent without Goliath's presence. He built a small campfire, the flickering flames a stark contrast to the overwhelming darkness that now seemed to envelop the woods. He sat there, staring into the dancing fire, the crackling wood the only sound in the immense quiet. He processed the incredible cascade of events that had unfolded over the past few days. A collision, a bleeding Bigfoot, a bond built on compassion and shared vulnerability, and finally, a heartbreaking farewell. Each memory was vivid, sharp, almost tactile. He traced the contours of Goliath's face in his mind, recalled the intelligent depth of its eyes, the surprisingly gentle touch of its hand. It was a story no one would ever believe, a secret he would carry alone. He was no longer the pragmatic, skeptical truck driver he had been before that fateful night. The encounter had stripped away his preconceived notions, shattered the comfortable boundaries of his reality, and expanded his understanding of what was possible in the world. He had faced the unknown, not with fear, but with an unexpected capacity for empathy and courage. As the embers of his fire slowly died down, and the first hints of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Michael knew that his life on the road would continue, but he would carry this secret, this profound experience, as an invisible, sacred burden, a constant reminder of the extraordinary encounter that had forever altered the course of his existence. The legend was real, and he had been a part of it. Michael continued his long, solitary journeys across the vast expanse of the American highways, the rumble of his truck engine, a constant companion. Yet the world around him had irrevocably shifted. The familiar landscapes, once seen through the lens of a pragmatic, world-weary driver, now shimmered with an unseen magic, a hidden layer of existence he had once dismissed as fable. He carried the secret of his encounter like a precious, fragile shard of glass tucked deep within the chambers of his heart, a quiet guardian of the unknown. The monotony of the road had been replaced by a profound awareness, an almost spiritual connection to the wild places he traversed. Every dense forest he passed, every remote mountain range, seemed to whisper tales of ancient beings and uncharted mysteries. He was no longer just Michael, the truck driver. He was Michael, the man who had touched the extraordinary, who had looked into the eyes of a legend and seen not a monster, but a soul. He found himself paying closer attention to the subtle nuances of nature, noticing things he would have once overlooked. A snapping twig in an unusually still woods, a misplaced rock, a cluster of berries disturbed in a pattern too regular for mere animal foraging. These were no longer random occurrences. They were potential echoes of Goliath, lingering evidence that his unique experience was not a dream, but a tangible event that had etched itself into the very fabric of his being. Sometimes, pulled over at a remote rest stop, bordering an untouched forest, he would walk to the edge of the tree line, his eyes scanning the undergrowth, half expecting, half hoping, to see a fleeting shadow, a massive form melting silently into the deeper woods. He never did, not really, but the mere possibility, the belief that Goliath was out there, thrived within him, a subtle affirmation that his impossible encounter was undeniably real. He would occasionally find a broken branch, high up, snapped with a force no ordinary animal could muster, or a footprint, larger than any bear, partially obscured by fallen leaves, and a surge of profound connection would wash over him, a quiet assurance that his friend, his gentle giant, was thriving. The true meaning of his encounter, he realized, transcended the mere existence of a mythical creature. It was a revelation about compassion, a lesson in courage that extended beyond physical bravery. It was about facing the terrifying unknown, not with fear, but with an open heart. He had extended a hand of healing to a being that represented everything wild and untamed, and in doing so, had healed something within himself. That brief, intense period with Goliath had stripped away his cynicism, unveiling the vast, unexplained wonders of the natural world. He had learned that true strength lay not in dominance, but in empathy, and that the deepest connections could be forged without a single word being spoken. The forest was no longer just a backdrop to his journey. It was a living, breathing entity, a sanctuary for incredible, unspoken secrets. He often reflected on the importance of respecting the wild and its inhabitants, not just the visible ones, but all creatures, known and unknown. His story, whispered only to the digital ether, was a testament to the fact that there was still so much beyond our understanding, so much we had yet to discover, right here on our own planet. It was a plea for humility, for reverence, for the preservation of these last wild spaces where such wonders could still exist. His experience had reshaped his entire worldview, instilling in him a quiet advocacy for the untamed world, a silent promise to protect its mysteries. He often felt a strange sense of responsibility, not just to Goliath, but to all the unseen wonders that lurked just beyond the veil of human perception. So, if my tale has stirred something within you, if it has made you question the boundaries of belief, then I ask you to do a few things. Please like this video, share it with someone who appreciates a good mystery, and subscribe to this channel for more true, chilling, and utterly inexplicable encounters. And I implore you, share your own stories in the comments below. Have you ever felt a presence in the woods? Seen something that defy explanation? The world is full of wonders, and sometimes all it takes is an open mind to find them. Keep your eyes open, your senses keen, and remember, the wilderness holds many secrets. Next time, we plunge into the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where a solitary hiker stumbled upon an ancient, malevolent force. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay safe and keep believing in the inexplicable.